All right, we're going to come to order here as the Ojai Building Appeals Board, November 13th, 2013, and we'll wait for our multitasker to arrive. And Sherry, could you please engage the roll call?
Board Member Daddy?
Here.
Hilgers?
Here.
Farmer?
Here.
Wyrick?
Here.
Hanson?
And next would be Pledge of Allegiance, and Wendy, could you lead us, please?
Ready, begin. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is there anyone with any public communications that they'd like to come forward and share with us at this time? All right. Then I guess we will move on to the consent item, which is the minutes. And I'll entertain any comments. I have a couple, but I'll let everyone else have a chance to make any comments on the minutes or questions. If no one else has anything, I guess I'll be the gadfly and ask a couple things. On page 2, under Board Member Daddy, it states that will the requirement be included in Cycle 5? Ms. McLaughlin stated that the residential building reports requirement is a city law and will carry over to the next cycle. Did you also state that that would be carry over to the next cycle unless repealed or amended? Or I'm just saying this is, or Ms. McLaughlin, did you state that?
I could have possibly stated that, yes, because it is something that would be able to be considered at any
Yeah.
time. Any of our city laws are able to be reconsidered.
Right, and I just thought that perhaps the minutes could be amended to include the unless repealed or amended.
Thank
Would
you.
be accurate. I think you might have said that.
That would be fine.
Okay. And then under 3, appointment of the Ad hoc Sewer Connection Committee, it states that Chair Wyrick opened the item, work, et cetera, work in coordination with the City of Ojai in legalizing unpermitted second units and make some concessions in regard to their fees. I'd like to add, and I don't know if this belongs in the minutes, but I think I kind of talked a lot about considering proportionality in refining the principle of proportionality in the consideration of a dwelling unit, or the definition of a dwelling unit. Does anyone else remember my talking about that in connection with?
Yes.
And how specific would I need to be to add that?
I'll re-listen to the minutes and
Okay.
amend the minutes.
I'm ready to approve them as long, I believe I did specifically talk about the issue of the definition of a EDU and the need for considering some proportionality in that definition. And the next thing, again, it's in the minutes, but I'm kind of a stickler for this kind of thing. I apologize. On number 4, on the public education of appeal procedures, Ms. McLaughlin noted she consulted with city acting building official and went through part 1 and 2 there. It went through had an issue with the code sections. And I do see that it's in the form for putting in an application for consider of an appeal. The point I'm trying to make is I don't see anything in there about alternate means. Did you discuss that in connection with answering the question about what would be in?
I may not have. It is in the guidelines.
It's in the guidelines. Well, if you didn't say it, then it's not in the minutes. I was.
I'm not positive at this point.
Yeah, I don't think
on
you
that.
probably didn't. Yeah, I just noted that because that's part of the appeal
Right.
as the alternate means of
Correct.
compliance. Yeah. Okay. That's all I have. So, that last comment doesn't belong in the minutes. Okay. Anybody want to? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a
motion that we approve the minutes.
Okay.
I second the motion.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll move on then. I want to make we have one board member, Mr. Daddy, has normally, as the case is overextended, and is having to leave at 7:30 or a little bit before, and I don't see, in response to his concern about wanting to deal with some things at the front end that he thought were a priority. I suggest that under discussion items, we combine 2A, B with 4. I don't see any problem with doing that. They kind of go together anyway. And then go through the rest of them, 3, 5, 6, and 7, as time allows. And we don't need a motion for that, do we? No, okay. All right, so let's move into the discussion of the second dwelling compliance program guidelines, proposed changes, status of applications prior to adoption, and protocol for handling appeals. I don't necessarily think we have to take that in order. I think we could take it in terms of consideration that each individual board member has. And again, I'm going to put the onus on you, Mr. Daddy, Board Member Daddy, since you have under more time constraints with the rest of us. Would you like to lead off with your primary concerns or discussion?
I think where I'm.
I think where I'm having a little bit of a concern with this is I'm looking at some of the memorandum and I'm looking at how they're inserted and I'm looking at how they apply. And that is starting to get to be problematic for me just because, and I'm sure this is my issue, I thought I had an understanding of what we're doing, and then after I see some of the memorandum, it really confuses me as to what the point is. So since I got into this concentric circle, let me explain one of the memorandum, and we don't need to dice and slice all these, but again, it does concern me. We have a memorandum, rightly, wrongly, I don't really understand, but it gets into the need for it says carbon dioxide unit, but it is a carbon monoxide.
Okay, so
Correct.
that has to do with review of existing application.
Right,
B.
and so what
Let's be specific about what we're referring to.
Right.
So that would be the memorandum dated November 13th, 2013. Item 2B on the agenda, status of any compliance applications or inquiries, correct?
Okay.
Okay, I'm trying to be specific here.
Nope,
so-
no, that's, hey, that's great.
Okay.
When I read that is a 2013 code. And my understanding is that only homes that were newly constructed and permitted this year, besides my home, actually have these. And so I'm wondering, as I see these memorandum, if they're going to be a number of these that mandate that everything is to the current 213 code. My original assumption or guess was that we would take the code that was in effect at the time, that the best construction date was evaluated or determined based on the fee that we were going to charge for that permit. So if we determined it was a 1985 conversion, addition, whatever they did, we would charge those permitting costs. And my thought was that the codes that were in place at that time would be the codes that needed to, the unit needed to qualify. But when I see 213 codes, that tells me my assumption somewhere is incorrect. So I'd like us to, the number one thing I want to do is I want to understand the ground rules. I want to understand how this works. I don't want to have something out there where people come in and I don't want any assumption, only to find out that they assumed wrong and now there's this other huge set of criteria they're unsure about after they've gone through the process. If we're going to make these things comply at 213 code, and we just tell everybody everything's got to qualify to today's date, and
Let's give Director McLaughlin a chance to respond to that, because I think that's probably a question all of us have.
Right. And I'll be glad to go through some of it. I will defer some to Steve Stewart, the building official. But yes, you are correct that based on the guidelines, we will be looking at things based on when things were built. There was, you can review the guidelines and look at what it states, but it's clearly, health and safety in that. The aspect of the carbon monoxide, and I apologize for that mistake. Hopefully it was autocorrect that I'd done something wrong, but it is monoxide. And I apologize for that. But that aspect, I will defer to this building official, but it's my understanding because of state law, we don't have an option if an inspector goes on site, but I will defer.
There's really two areas of the code that the state has required during the course of a permit being issued on a piece of property that would have to be in compliance, and that's with smoke detectors, and now the carbon monoxide tester. And that retrofit would be allowed to be battery operated in most circumstances. In some cases, if it's including some type of an alteration where they're removing interior wall covering, ceiling covering, or an addition, then they would have to be hardwire with a battery backup. But it is really a safety issue in somewhat a minimal cost in the overall perspective of providing safety.
That is the same whether it's a non-conforming or a conforming permit.
That's correct.
And what's the citation for where this is?
I'd be happy to go get a building code and,
Well, I mean, I think that's what we would all like, is to have exactly, what are the things that can't be subordinated to the year of construction code. I mean, I think that's something that's real important for the second unit program, is to know exactly what can and cannot be, in place relative to the modifying this program to make it work better under the non-conforming amnesty part as opposed to the conforming part of the rest of the second unit code. So, I mean, how do we know? Is there some place in the code that specifically talks about this?
yes,
Okay, and we could get that emailed to us?
sure.
Okay, go.
I want to actually speak from actual experience. And so here's what happens. When I have a tree or a fire, I have something happen. What generally will happen is we replace what is ever damaged.
Right.
Certain municipalities have what they call building code or ordinance law. And what I will do is we will get a checklist that says, because of the earthquake law, you're going to have to go ahead and raise and strap your water heater. We're going to need a child electronic eye safety garage door so we don't kill any kids. We're going to need dedicated electric circuits. You can no longer use extension cords for garage door openers. We're going to need self-closing doors, and now what we're going to do is instead of this width of sheetrock, we're going to need this sheetrock. I have a number of issues where the code ordinance exceeds the actual amount of damage caused by the fire, the collision, the tree, the incident. Okay? What I want to make sure is when we start this program, we have a clearly defined list. So, what have I done? I've ripped out kitchens and put in GFI on all the water inside. It would appear to me that GFI, ground fault interruption, anti-electrocution plugs in water sources inside would be just as important for safety as the carbon monoxide. And if we're then going to go to that, we have a fire sprinkler rule. So what I want to make sure is when we start down this road and somebody steps up, they don't find out that there's a gradual list of 20 different safety issues that are going to be imposed on them as they go through. I want to make sure that the list stops at some place.
Well, certainly as you read the documents coming out of Housing and Community Development, they again and again and again talk about the need to have just that done. Have it very clearly defined exactly what needs to be met in order to get this non-conforming permit, if that's the right language to use. And correct me if I'm wrong. And I think it raises a larger issue, because whereas there's a lot of guidance about how this is supposed to be very specific, this resolution as adopted on April 9th of 2013 is full of mays. May this, may that. And it would seem to me important to try to figure out exactly how to make this as simple to understand and to deal with as possible. You raise the issue of fire sprinklers. Unless a dwelling is deemed legal or otherwise exempt by fire protection ordinance, fire sprinklers may be required. I'm not sure the normal homeowner understands what that means, except it might strike fear in their hearts in terms of coming forward. And so I guess I'm trying to, that's why I was very pointed in asking the question, exactly what is, cannot be put back to the time of construction and what can be. And I think that's something that we're going to have to focus on very carefully to make this thing work. To remove as much of the maze as possible in terms of it has to be this, this, and that. So I'm sorry. I was broadening your point.
And I like that point, because I've run into these things where we have a rule that said 70% of the ceiling, and we must put in fire sprinklers. And on Pepper Tree Lane, when I had the fire, that meant I had to have fire sprinklers, but it was a quarter of a mile down to the main.
So we're
And
going
so
to
I had to trench up the street and put in a new service line to feed the fire sprinklers. Well,
Exactly.
that's fine if it's an insurance claim and I'm bringing my checkbook. I've got a huge checkbook. But when the individuals are bringing a $38,000 checkbook to run a water line down to feed a $15,000 sprinkler and some other items,
Precisely.
it starts getting this domino effect starts to get pretty horrific. And again, if they choose not to get in, that's somebody else's realm. That's not my realm. It's not for me to decide.
Right.
It's just if they're going to get into this thing, they really need to know
Yeah.
where the thing is going to stop. And we take a look at these things,
Mr. Farmer?
and I think I've said enough.
Yeah,
Tom?
Mr. Farmer?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think we just need to make it as clear as possible to the public or whoever happens to come before us that we're here not to, prosecute them. We're here to help them out. And the clearer we make it for them, probably the easier job for us and the city. And too, I know in banking it was real important for me to explain to my other loan people, to explain to the customers what it is, what basically makes up a loan and why we're there to help them out. And so I think possibly to mitigate that, we should just come up with something that makes it,
I would
easier.
mention that on
See, you're waiting to say something.
attachment B, page 3, which is the guidelines based on the resolution 1314. If you look at the occupancy safety under the health and safety requirements,
Page 3 of the final adopted version, attachment
yes,
B?
B,
Yeah.
it's in your packet on page 3.
Yeah.
Number A, under health and safety requirements, occupancy safety, a battery-operated smoke detector is required in the immediate area, i.g. the hallway of all sleeping areas. A carbon monoxide detection device must also be installed at an appropriate location if the compliance unit contains fossil fuel burning appliance.
Right.
So I just wanted to
Well,
point that out so
and let
that
me
you're
respond
aware
to
of
that. I think that's exactly how it should be. Specific, this, you have to do this, period, okay? What I'm really referring to is when you read further down there about the may and the
Right.
fire
No, I
sprinkler.
understood what- yes.
What does that mean? And I want to make two other specific examples, Mr. Stewart. I'll let you, just a
Thank
minute.
you.
It states on page 2 that qualifying property must conform to the minimum requirements of the Uniform Housing Code. It doesn't specify in place at the time of construction. And I think that's an important omission. It doesn't have it says Uniform Housing Code without date. Normally, when you state something like that, it defers to what's in existence now rather than specifically what's in existence at the time of construction. So that's the kind of ambiguity I think needs to be removed. Also, under modified zoning regulations, where it talks about must conform to the requirements on page 4, set forth in 10-2.1709, with the following exceptions, have to comply with that with the following exceptions, in 1709 is conformance with Title 24. I don't know why, is that really the intent, that we have something built in the 50s has to come up with Title 24 compliance in order to have a non-conforming use permit? That's the kind of thing that I think, from a policy standpoint, I think should guide how this is revised. Go ahead.
The question I have is, I don't know if it's on, yeah, it's on.
Mr. Stewart, I'm sorry, you're next.
Do these rules apply to the current program that we're in, or does it happen after June
This is
2014? So the fire sprinklers and all these things have to go in now? I
Well,
mean-
are you talking about a compliance unit? We have two different ordinances.
I know.
One is, or two different programs. One is an existing, if somebody came in today to the counter and wanted to do a second unit, they comply with today's codes, and if the fire codes, sprinklering would apply.
For new
they-
construction,
Right.
right.
If you're speaking to the compliance unit, then it's how it reads here. And I believe, Steve, I will defer to you. I believe it states here on the fire sprinklers that it's county, we have county review if necessary.
Yeah, Mr.
Yeah,
Stewart.
and I just wanted to mention that I think why it's somewhat ambiguous, and I would agree with you, it is somewhat ambiguous in regards to the fire sprinklers, is that the city of Ojai does not have authority over that portion of the code. That's under the Ventura County Fire Protection District, and we would have to go to them and give them some type of criteria, and then they could respond to us on when fire sprinklers may be required or not. But that interpretation, that authority lies directly with the county fire district, and that can change from time to time when we don't have any authority or control over that.
And there's no difference between the conforming and the non-conforming permit in that regard?
It's their interpretation of the fire code, and more importantly, the amendments they have made to their fire code.
It basically means communicating with them and
Right.
finding out what they say.
And so that may be a good exercise for us to participate in, if you would like some general guidance of what the requirements are today in that regard, if we do this. And I think that would be helpful. But at the end of the day, it's their call, their authority, their decision, their county fire accord appeals board that would rule on that.
Thank you.
In regards to the Uniform Housing Code, actually, that document has not been published since 1997. It's no longer a published document or an updated document on a triennial basis. And so easily, it could be considered to utilize that document as the
That could be
as the
referenced
document.
directly.
That could be referenced directly. And just for a point of information, that is what we refer to is a maintenance code. It's not a code which we build to. That would be either the residential code or the building code. So it's
I thought
really
that
a
was the
maintenance
international
code.
housing code was the maintenance.
No, the International Property Maintenance Code
Yes.
is now superseded the Uniform Housing Code as the published
This is the
document.
pre,
This is
Internet- okay,
the
I got it.
1997 under the International Building Code, which was promulgated back then. In 2000, all the three code-making bodies in the United States came together and formed one body, is now the International ICC, and they now promulgate a International Property Maintenance Code.
so this is something that could be clearly referenced by citation.
And we
at
could
the-
have
at
a
the desk there
document,
when they come in.
1997.
And have the clarity
uniform
that
hou-
way.
And you could read that.
Yeah.
It's actually boilerplate. I mean,
It's a code book that was written in 1997. The city still has that essentially on their ordinance as an enforcement document. But it's it will never be changed again because it's no longer in publication. It's a historical.
Well, that's great. I have two more questions while you're there, close to the mic, okay, if I might be indulged. Number one, flood elevation. Must be comply with flood hazard requirements in Title IX, Chapter 9. May require the compliance unit to have the lowest floor at or above the base flood elevation. Are we talking possibly about having the second unit non-conforming permit only be issued if the second unit is put on a higher level than the principal residence?
I'm clearly not an expert on flood elevations. I would have to defer that to our city engineer for some consultation, but we can make note.
I think that would be
Get
another
that.
perfect example. It certainly seems relatively not reasonable to have the second unit have to be put up higher to get a non-conforming permit than the principal residence, or face a penalty.
Now that I've said I'm not an expert and don't know a lot about that, there is some exceptions in the federal insurance standards that allow some modifications to be made. I'm just not that familiar with them, and we can go back and take a look at that.
And the next sentence, let's raise the issue, contains lead hazards. If something was built before 1960, or 1974, I believe, what was the year? It was in the 70s, wasn't it?
Where are you in the?
Next sentence under building hazards. If the compliant unit contains lead hazards, such conditions must be abated. I don't know exactly what the conditions are. I don't know whether encapsulation gives you an exception or not. Again, the question I'm raising is having a second unit getting its non-conforming permit only doing things that we're not requiring of the principal residence. And I think whenever that happens, we need to take a careful look at it. Maybe justified, may not be. But I think that's the kind of thing that really needs to be thought carefully through. Because we may have houses, let me ask you this question. In California, if your primer coat is lead, but your top coats has lead in it, but your top coats on an older building are in good shape, do you have to abate? Anybody know?
That's under federal statutes, and I'm not that familiar
Okay.
with all the criteria with that.
Again, it's the kind of thing I think that needs as much clarity as possible when we're looking at revising this. And lastly, on page 4, new construction requirements. It states, all repairs and alterations made necessary to comply with the property standards, which is the 1997 Uniform Housing Code. But then again, it seems to refer to the existing code standards for repairs and alterations.
That's the way I would interpret it, the latter of what you've just said. Because as we stated, the Uniform Housing Code is really a maintenance code issue, and this moves into modifications, alterations,
Right.
new constructions.
Well,
and
repair, but it also means repair.
repair.
It says repairs and
Yeah.
alterations. Yeah, so in other words, if something was going to be repaired to the standard under which it was built, it would not, you're not talking about applying the standard to which it was built, the code in place that it was built, but the current code.
That would be my reading of that. That would be my interpretation.
And that's, again, a policy decision.
That would be my
Okay.
thought on that as well.
Mr. Daddy.
Chair, I would really hope that we'd either remove all these specific items or have clarity. When we talk about Title 24, I've had trees on houses, a little bit of electric fire, and the next thing I know, and it's fine because insurance is set up to do this, but I find out that I have to replace 3 windows on the south side with low E,
Right.
energy efficient, and so of course they're not damaged. But under the code or building ordinance, I'm putting them in. I put a lot of things in that are not damaged for code. And in the spirit of that, what I want to know is are we going to require these people under Title 24 to come in and put in dual and triple glazed and low glass? I just
Mr.
don't want any gotchas on any items.
And-
If they're public and they know what they are and they can look at the list and they can clearly understand
Right.
what they're going to go through if they attempt this, I'm fine.
And Mr. Stewart, am I wrong in interpreting the way this is written now, that compliance with Title 24 would be required?
I would need to study this in a little more detail, but my initial reading of that is yes. Now, I kind of go back to the building code, because it clearly defines what constitutes a repair, what
Right.
constitutes an alteration, what constitutes an addition. If it's strictly a repair under the the International Building Code or California Building Code or Title 24 as it's referenced, that can go back in with not meeting all the stringent energy requirements and other building code requirements. But if it is an alteration, if it's defined as an alteration in the code, then yes, it would have to comply with the energy code and the other applicable codes in that regard. So I think there's some good language that exists in there. And I know, we're talking about some very clear definitions in, if I brought the building code in, it's this thick.
Right.
And so it has a lot more clarity in that, but the way I would read that is that I would prefer that not to use the word repair, but that's just my opinion, and it's
And
not
I'm going to
really.
just ask you for that clarification, because it doesn't, the repair was under new construction requirements.
Right,
The Title 24 is included in the Ojai Municipal Code, Section 10-2-1709, where it says, at a minimum, qualifying property must conform to the requirements set forth with the following exceptions. There's no Title 24 exception. So that would mean whether repairs are needed or not, as written, as I understand it.
yeah, I can see how that's confusing to you, and it's a little bit confusing to me, the way it reads. I would prefer that we reference back to like the Uniform Housing Code, and then we know what the minimum standards are based on the Uniform Housing Code. And then you could add to that as the base document for some other type of element. Essentially, and I'm clearly not, and please don't take me, I'm not criticizing this document whatsoever, but we're trying to condense a code document that, if I brought it in, would stack up this high into, 10 pages. And it's difficult at the best to do that. And so, so there's going to be a lot of gray area, a lot of interpretation because of this. Of course, you're asking me as the building official, I'm going to refer back to the definitions that are in the Title 24 adopted code of how we look at things, because that's where we go when we're looking at that.
And please understand,
So-
I don't have a problem, I don't know when Title 24 came in, but, if
Well,
it came in when, or it had different versions. But, again, what's in place at the time of construction should be the basic, the core. And then we add to that as necessary.
Well, maybe I can help provide some clarification in regards to Title 24. Actually, Title 24 is a state statute. It includes all the codes in regards to construction. So it incorporates the California Building Code, the California Residential, Plumbing, Electrical, Mechanical, Energy, Historic, existing building code, in the California Green Standards Code. And so it includes all of those documents that are enforced for new construction.
Right.
I think what the attempt here was trying to be established here is that we would take a maintenance code, the International Property Maintenance Code or the Uniform Housing Code, and try to use that as the standard, and then try to make modifications to that document for the purpose of this program. Unfortunately, that there is some gray area, and it's going to require some interpretation of what that means. And if the Building Board of Appeals wants it in more clarity, maybe we need to kind of look at it from another directive.
All we can do is advise.
Right.
We're
I understand that.
purely advisory, and so we're aggressively advising, I guess would be appropriately what we're doing. So, Mr. Steele, I think we understand our role here very well. We don't have any legislative power at all, of any kind, all right? But we certainly take seriously advising the council as to the direction we think would make the program work, because you know, I've taught, you know, as I've studied this and talked to other people and heard other people talk, I don't, if the intent, and again, maybe that's something we ought to start talking about here, if the intent is to do large numbers of these, the program as adopted on April 9th, 2013 is probably not compatible with doing large numbers in a relatively short period. That's subject to debate, but, Board Member Hanson?
Thank you. Early on, I thought the amnesty or second unit compliance program was a good idea. And the more I read this and the more I hear people talking about it, I don't think it's a good idea. I think it hurts the poorest people in our community. It certainly doesn't help the landlord. Few people can comply with this. Many of the people that have second units are those that are trying to pay off a mortgage. Yeah, somebody said, oh, it's people going to Paris on that money. That may be one or two people, but mostly these people have it for a reason. They can't comply with all this stuff. They don't even understand it all. I've read it through 3 or 4 times, and I'm still scratching my head. And I just think that this program, as it is here, I don't think it's a good idea.
Other people want to weigh in on the idea of tractability intent? Go ahead.
That was my question too. If the intent is to bring people forward, and I've talked to a lot of people, I don't think it's going to happen. And I don't understand. It's kind of like an empty house. You know, you're getting all ready for a party and you just do the most you can, and it's so beautiful. You got this and that, and the caterer are coming, but nobody comes. Nobody's coming to your party. And it's terrifying. These are a lot of people have lived on the margins for so long, and I don't see them stepping forward. So I don't quite understand how a program like this could even begin unless the city has a massive enforcement policy. And you actually go, how do you know where the houses are? If people don't want to participate, what happens? You can't use them as numbers, potential numbers for your housing deficit. It's just a tremendous problem. And since I became involved with this, I've talked endlessly to people, different people about it, and of course my family, we talk about it. And you just go around and around in circles, and everything sounds great. You know, the safety, bringing it up to code. It's just a huge problem. And I also don't see it bringing in a lot of people. How many houses do we know? How many houses exist now in the city that are compliant second dwelling units? Is there any kind of
compliant or non-compliant?
Well, I mean, that could be counted as toward the RENA numbers for affordable housing. Do we have any idea?
Do we have any idea? Ones that might be reasonably get a
No.
non-conforming permit?
No, we do not have, I mean, we have 20 that have paid the sewer district fees, but we've not been out to verify, first off, that they are truly second units, and then whether the applicants are willing to come forward and can comply with, you know, these are sort of the minimum from a safety standpoint, and I'll defer to the building official, but, you know, I think when they originally looked at doing this, and I wasn't involved in it, but I think, you know, you can give in certain areas, but there's certain things the city's got to uphold from a safety standpoint, you know. And so That's why we haven't even begun to look at garage conversions and things like that, because a lot of times those are closer to property lines. There's other issues that have to be dealt with.
Yeah, we haven't talked about sizes and things like that yet. I guess where I would, am I cutting you off? Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess my question was, what was the intent of this? I mean, the intent was the amnesty program, obviously, and that was to encourage people to come forward who obviously didn't have an issue, or that they built maybe something illegally, or not illegally, but maybe it's just not conforming.
It's
to
been
the
converted
property.
potentially.
Right,
A lot
a
of the cases could be
non-conforming.
somebody has put a kitchen in to, say, a guest house or a
Right.
detached building or attached room and closed it off, and they're renting it out, like Board Member Hanson was indicating that people are doing it, renting it out, trying to do things that way. And so we have to evaluate what they're doing, and each and every case is going to be a unique.
Understandable, and I know when the sewer district came out with this, 3-4 years ago, they scared a lot of people into stepping forward and saying, hey, I actually hooked you into the sewer, I'm sorry, amnesty program. They said, okay, now that you step forward, you pay our fee, and that's it.
You go on your way.
And then the city come up, said, okay, now that you have your amnesty program, maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe we should come up with something also, just about the same time, right?
I don't believe it was necessarily the same time, but it could
Well,
have
it
been,
was
because I
pretty
know
close. Yeah.
there was discussions in the fourth cycles when they were
Right.
starting early on, so it could have been, easily
Yeah,
could have
and
been.
then there was word that, okay, if you were on the sanitation list, maybe you ought to come to the city and sign up for theirs. And some people signed up for it over a year ago, and nothing whatsoever has happened.
If they're garage conversions, we can't do anything other than indicate at the current time that doesn't comply with our program. In the cases of the other ones that have come forward, there's been a couple. One was a guest house, and one was that the other one on Daly? It was a detached building. Oh, it was built originally as an office for a lawyer years ago. Back in the records showed that, and it was, I believe it's attached, and they're working on it. They've paid their sewer fee, and they're working through us to get it so that, that we can issue a permit.
Right. Well, I think it's important that we encourage people to come, if we're going to go through with this, to come forward. But we need to understand it, and definitely they need to understand what they're up against, okay? And make it as clear to them, and try to make them understand, or help them understand, what they're going to need to conform.
And we may
So-
be able to do some of that discussion as we get on to item 5 about the ombudsman.
And I'd like to respond to a couple things that you said, Dr. McLaughlin. One was that there are minimum health and safety requirements. Absolutely. But we've already identified several things that aren't, that are in here. Environmental standards for Title 24 being an example. That's not really a health and safety issue. So I think that's where the approach comes in, which then leads to my second comment, so I would take some issue with your saying this particular program as drafted was focused primarily just on minimum standards necessary for health and safety. There's a lot more in there than that, that potentially make it difficult to get this non-conforming permit. And then the second thing I think is related to that is that, yes, there should be, as Mr. Stewart was saying, perhaps very clear cited, this is the Uniform Housing Code. We're going to add to this A, B, C, D. That's it. So yes, every situation is unique, but I think that an applicant looking for a non-conforming, and certainly a non-conforming permit, and certainly this is in the spirit from everything I've read from Housing and Community Development and the state second unit law, is it should be as clearly delineated as possible as to what it takes to get this permit. So yes, it's unique, but that doesn't take away from I would think, the policy goal of being as absolutely clear and simple as possible. So that's my two comments.
Chair?
Yes.
As I've read this, and again, it kind of looks like the same stuff we went for a couple of years on the old local codes. What I'd like to do is, I'd like to take all discretion out of this. My company has about 45 million clients, and we have a 24-page policy, not thousands, 24 pages, that handles every instance there is done. 24 pages. There's no gray, there's no maybe. 24 pages, all done, everything. What I'm concerned in as I read this document and I'm hearing health and safety, I'm taking a look at cited standards. It's 7.5 feet. And I'd like to know, and I don't want an answer, I'd like to know why 7.5 feet is a minimum health and safety item. I would like to know why 70 square foot is a minimum size space for health and safety. I would like to know exactly what the specifications are when we cite adequate ventilation. What I see is there's a whole bunch of things in here that allow discretion to turn people down. Not to be able to qualify, not to be able to quantify, not to be able to take that off your checklist. There's a whole lot of things in here that I just can't relate to. The other thing is we've got our 3,151 homes. We have a whole lot of homes that don't have 7.5 foot ceilings, that don't have 70 square foot for these little tiny little tiny bedrooms. And I mean, are we going to do, and needs to be well illuminated? I can understand when they say we have to have electricity and light in a water closet. I get that. That's pretty simple. It's precise. It's there. But adequate light and adequate ventilation isn't there. I don't understand what that is. I don't understand how you'd measure that. So I don't really think that these are minimum necessary standards. Because if we just want to kill a program, we've pretty much done it. We're going back over the same stuff that we went over with these local codes a couple of years ago, where we're adding all of these codes and maintenances and this and that, and then we come back and say it's health and safety, and it's not. There is no health and safety if it's health and safety. I will buy the ground fault interruption. I will buy the electronic eyes. I will buy a whole bunch of these things. Carbon monoxide, I'll buy all that stuff. But let's don't get into adequate ventilation is a reason to deny somebody when it's not quantifiable. We just can't quantify it. And that then becomes discretionary, and I don't care for discretionary. So, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Mr. Stewart, I think what he was talking about with things like the building room dimensions, that comes from the Uniform Housing Code directly.
That's correct.
Yeah, and so, I mean, to be fair to him.
Oh, no, I want to be fair to him, but
Yeah,
that's not a health and
that's-
safety item.
I'm just saying that that's the reference document here. I mean, and just to be fair there. A couple other questions. The date of January 1st, 2006 for cutoff, rationale for that?
I
and-
believe that was the previous time limit on the housing element, the cycle 4, and so anything at that time period. I defer to Mr. Clark if he has a different answer, but I believe that the 2006 related to cycle 4.
Refer to the beginning of cycle 4.
It was when they got started talking about all of this. Was that correct? It was in the inner,
I don't know for sure either, but I suspect that it lines up with cycle 4.
and it could have been when the city started looking into these guidelines and trying to formalize them.
So it's not, it's almost like a convenience date rather than something dictated by larger issues. And the question
I think it's a policy that's in the housing element.
but I mean, we're about to debate a new housing element, right? That's kind of what I'm talking about. And I think everyone's sort of accepted the idea that there's going to be modifications to this program of one sort or another, whether they conform to what we're suggesting or not. And all I'm suggesting is, since we keep pushing this date, it looks like we're already talking about going past July 1 of 2014 for the expiration of this program. as you move that date forward, should you move the cutoff date forward too, just to have the same, I'm just asking. That's all I'm asking. But also, getting back, has there ever been a discussion in the city, staff, planning commission, anybody, how many we're hoping to process here?
There's a goal.
I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Clark.
So this came from the crafting of the Cycle 4 housing element.
Right.
And in putting that together, the committee that was working on it was trying to find ways to achieve the RENA number.
Right.
And so
That's a number, yeah.
Yeah, that's a number that's assigned through a process outside the city. So we were assigned a RENA number, and we had to develop a series of programs. The challenge that
Right.
the group had was to develop a series of programs. So I think they made a very liberal estimate as to how many units might possibly be out there that could be legalized because they felt that was a better program, legalizing existing units
Right.
that are occupied by low and moderate income people, than some of the other options that they had. So it's I would say it's in the range of 300 and some.
So the goal is to
It's-
try to process in the range of 300.
The goal in Cycle 4 housing element was to achieve that number.
Okay.
Whether that number is realistic or not, I think is very debatable.
Right.
But that's the grand experiment that we're embarking on.
Well, and I think that's part of the point that some of us I think maybe all of us are getting to, is you kind of get your policy goal there, and then you go, all right, what supports achieving that? Both in how the program is written, how it's staffed, and that speaks to the issue of being as simple and clear as possible. It can be processed faster. You're probably not going to get I'm going to say something that I may be completely off base on, and it's my personal opinion. The program as written isn't compatible with getting 300 done in 1 or 2 years, I don't think.
Well, yeah, and I think no one's married to those particular guidelines.
Yeah.
We had to put some guidelines together to get the thing started, and so we did do it, but admittedly, it was done very quickly. And I think it's great now that we have a chance to sit down and think about it. So, it seems like an appropriate task for the board is to make suggestions on how to make it more simple. And I think you'll find that we'll be very open to those suggestions.
How to process 300 in a year or two, if that's the goal. I mean, that's a big goal. That's a big challenge.
I tried to explain how that goal came up, and
I
I
understand.
think it was an extremely ambitious goal.
Yeah.
And in Cycle 5, we haven't actually set a goal for this. We've retained the program. So I think we have to be realistic.
And maybe come at it from both ends.
Yeah,
Get a realistic goal, and then say, here's a program that realistically can get there.
yeah. Frankly, our rush in moving forward is to show good faith to the state that we're actually implementing the program. And so, as they review Cycle 5, they look back and say, how did you perform on Cycle 4? We wanted to demonstrate that we were serious about it and that we at least had launched it. But certainly it lends itself to refinement and further thought and even reconsideration of the goal if that seems appropriate.
Mr. Clark, when you're up there, can I keep you there for a minute?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hop around with a couple of specific questions. The state second unit law says that our second unit ordinances, and I think our first one was 1904, 204, excuse me. Then there's, 204, and the second unit law went into effect in 03, where it says that our second unit ordinances are to be forwarded to HCD for review within 60 days of adoption. Have we done that?
I don't
beginning?
know. I don't know.
Do we have anything on record of HCD's response to any of our second unit ordinances beginning in 04?
We'd have to go back and look.
Okay. Let's see, there was something else I wanted to ask you about. We're going to get to this in just a second, okay? The second, and this, well, I think I'll just defer my other comment till later, but I was wondering about that. And also, have we heard back at all? That was my question, excuse me. Have we heard back at all anything from HCD on the housing element under review now?
Yeah, they have sent a review letter, and we're looking at it right now.
Okay. And when do you think
So
you'll be?
it will go to Planning Commission on the 20th, I believe. Is that
So it'll
correct?
be presented at the planning commission?
They were required to give us a letter by November 8th, which was last Friday.
Right.
We are turning this around as fast as we can. There's a consultant, John Douglas, who is working on the staff report. It will go out hopefully late this week, but it's a possibility it may be on Monday. We have a standard planning commission meeting next Wednesday, and the planning commission will discuss it. Part of the reason for trying to keep this going quickly is that we are mandated, we had 120 days after an October date of this year to get this adopted, and that date, the 120 days, ends up being early February, mid-February, I think it's the 12th of February of next year, that we have to adopt it. If we don't adopt it by that date, we are in a 4-year cycle, which is an expensive and
No, I
lengthy
understand.
process. So we are adamantly trying to get this to the Planning Commission on the 20th, open it up for public comment, public notice, all of that, and start the process. It's hopeful, because council only has the one meeting in December, to try to get it to council in December, so that if there's multiple hearings there, that we can go into January and still meet that February date.
We're talking about for cycle 5, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you're talking about finishing in December?
No, I'm not guaranteeing anything that way.
That's a big, tall order,
it's-
holiday season.
It's very important, in order to avoid the 4-year cycle, that we adopt a housing element by February 12th, I believe the date is.
February 12th.
Yeah. So we're moving it as quickly as we can, so that there's enough time to make whatever changes the council feel are appropriate between now and then. So that's the schedule that we're on.
Okay. I guess one last thing we'll just get to while you're there, and that's this issue of ministerial review, okay? And maybe I should allow you to sit down, and since Ann wrote the memo, is that, I'm
Either way's
referring to
fine.
the memo of protocol for a second, I'm sorry, Mr. Clark, I should have been referring to Ms. McLaughlin.
That's all right.
This is associated with the whole discussion of, and I see the memo where you state that since the city adopted a second dwelling unit ordinance, state rules do not directly apply.
That was my understanding from the city attorney, and the main idea on the ministerial aspects, if you look at the guidelines, primarily what I am thinking of is the zoning, the ministerial review under, if you go to page 4, modified, I'm sorry.
Yeah, page 4, modified zoning regulations.
Correct.
Part A,
And-
ministerial review.
Right. And that's basically the same as what our existing second unit is. It's a checklist, and we just have a yes or no. You either comply or you don't. And so the zoning aspects, the planning portion, not the building portion, but the planning portion, if somebody is appealing a ministerial act by our department, then the Article 13 that we've Article 30, the appeals procedures that are currently in the city code is what we are looking at.
Could I ask a couple questions of
Certainly.
how I'm confused? And I'm referring to a couple of handouts. And Mr. Daddy, could you hand Mr. Stewart? Ms. Miller? Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just going to read, and I'll tell you, I think it's going to become obvious why I'm confused.
No, that's fine.
All right? So what the city attorney has said, that the state's second unit law does not apply because we've adopted a second unit ordinance?
That is my read of that.
All right. I don't see any citation for his opinion on that.
Okay?
And I'm going to read some citations that are in this handout. The first is from Chapter 3 of the second State of California Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing. This is from HCD. requires local government to establish a process to consider approval of the development of secondary dwelling units. Local governments are required to provide ministerial approval of second units and promote their development. I have some other references near it on the next page. California Department of Housing and Community Development, housing element, what is ministerial review? It quotes Chapter 1062. It doesn't talk about exceptions if you've adopted your own code. In order for an application to be considered, it must be predictable, objective, fixed, quantifiable, and clear standards. An application should not be subject to excessively burdensome conditions or approval, should not be subject to a public hearing or public comment, and should not be subject to any discretionary decision-making process. There should be no local, legislative, quasi-legislative, or discretionary consideration of the applications except provisions for authorizing an administrative appeal of decision. Then it gets in a memorandum from the Deputy Director, H6 of 03, should a locality submit their second unit ordinances to HCD? Yes, as it's required. That they have a clearinghouse of local ordinances to help, and they also provide technical assistance to prepare these second order unit ordinances. And I would hope that the city would take advantage of the clearinghouse and the technical assistance offered. And then it says, can a locality on the last page consider an additional process to consider second units if the standards established by 1062 have been met? It says, if a local ordinance is consistent with subdivisions A and C through G, then you can do an ancillary set of broader standards. It doesn't say that you can not be in compliance. I don't get it. Where the opinion is coming that you can adopt a local second unit ordinance, either conforming or non-conforming, and not be in conformance with subdivisions A and C through G of state second unit law. I don't get it. Furthermore, if you look at the last two pages, there is a slideshow put together by the Department of Housing and Community Development on California's planning laws for affordable housing. You'll notice the second part slide says second unit law, government code, requires local government to establish process to consider second units, requires ministerial approval, requires standards that promote development of second units, both the conforming and the non-conforming side.
Right.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what is he citing in the face of all of these citations that ministerial approval, either for conforming or not conforming, is supplanted by adopting a second unit dwelling ordinance that I don't think is in conformance or may not be in conformance with the state second unit law.
I think it was related to the appeals. You were asking what the appeal process was.
Ministerial approval is not public.
Exactly. Well, and that's the issue. It states that a locality may provide an appeal process. I don't envision there really ever to be an appeal of the zoning aspect. It's, do you comply? If you look at our checklist, I mean, it's probably easier to go through the existing ordinance code, but I mean, we have a checklist. It's, zoning designation. Are you in this zone or not? One of the different zones. Are you, it's not a mobile home. It meets the minimum lot size. I mean, it's a yes or no. You meet it or you don't. And if somebody wants to appeal my decision, if I tell them, I'm sorry, you're showing me a plan that you only have 7,000 square feet, our law is that you have to have 8,500 in that zone. Okay, I mean, I can't imagine somebody appealing that, but if they want to, the appeal process for a zoning aspect would be per Article 30, and that zoning aspect, it's my understanding, would go to the Planning Commission. If it was something that is in this, that is a building code and a building official determination, and he made a decision, it would be, and somebody is appealing it, it would come to the Building Appeals Board.
Well, let me read again out of Chapter 1062, Statutes of 2002, page 9, in italics, part...
Wait, I'd like to get where you are, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, it's
no, I just
it's
want
the
to make
second
sure.
handout.
Thank you.
It's the second handout.
I appreciate that, thank you very much.
And the second page has Part A, number 3, in italics.
Yes.
When a local agency receives its first application on or after July 1st, 2003 for a permit pursuant to this subdivision, the application shall be considered ministerially without discretionary review or a hearing, notwithstanding section 65901 or 65906, which is appended to this, where 65901 is a zoning administrator issue, and 65906 it has to do with variances from zoning ordinances. I'm confused, okay? In other words, it seems like this is pretty clear, and then to be even more specific, it says that every state second unit code should be in conformance with A and C through G of this code section.
Which is on page 10, is that what you're speaking
Yeah,
to?
9 and 10 and 11.
Yeah, okay.
And you'll notice that they have minimum standards there in B that apply if you don't have a second unit program.
Right,
But then in G, says this section does not limit the authority of local agencies to adopt less restrictive requirements for the creation of second units. That's on page 11 in Part G. And also has H about shall submit a copy of the ordinances adopted pursuant to this subdivision, A or C, within 60 days of adoption. It seems, for example, the 640 square foot limit is more restrictive than what the state code is saying, that applies if there is no second unit ordinance.
right, and we have a second unit
And we have a second
ordinance.
unit, and the question is, as I read through this, it's almost an intent as well as a legal issue. I'm asking both things at the same time. Are we intending to be more stringent than the state code in this matter, on both conforming and non-conforming? If so, why? And I still don't understand the ministerial issue. It seems,
It is ministerially, I mean, I'm a little confused in your question on that part, and I'll be honest on that. It is a ministerial act. When somebody comes in for a second unit, we are evaluating, do you comply with what the law states? Okay, so it is ministerial. And then your other question, and now I've lost.
is having a public hearing if they have an appeal.
Based on this, you can't.
Right.
Based on the laws that you have read and the way I understand
I'm
it.
not an attorney, I'm just trying to
Right,
understand.
I agree with you. I agree. It's very clear. A local, you guys as a board asked for me to investigate the appeals process.
Yeah, what would
And
be
what
the
I
protocol
found,
for
and
an
I
appeal?
agree with you,
Yeah.
that it states that the local agency can have an appeal process. Again, I don't understand why somebody would appeal if they look at what the rules are. I mean, it is, do you comply with this or do you not? But if somebody wanted to, we can provide for that appeal process, and we do in our ordinance, right, as we have it today, we do have an appeal process, but if that's not adequate for what you're looking at, of course, we can discuss that, and you can advise the council and things that way.
It just seems like the intent of the state law, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if a person has a second unit, they feel they have a beef about it in some respect, that they shouldn't be subject to a public hearing, period.
I agree. It's a ministerial act, and they are stating in the state law, based on my read, and I don't think our city attorney disagrees with this, they are stating, I mean, that's what would be interesting, that it gets appealed, and based on the appeal process, we take it to the planning commission, but it's not a public hearing. We can't take public testimony based on what it's stating.
Or
Okay?
even have the public in there.
I'd let our attorney figure that out
I'm
if
just
and
saying-
when we get there, but seemingly, well, we have open meetings. I don't know whether it
Well,
can be an
I'm-
open meeting, a Brown Act, I'm not gonna go there on that.
Well, that's what I'm reading.
Right.
It says-
It's seemingly-
HCD is saying no.
Right, seemingly, and I would take whatever, any official wants to tell me on that and direct on that. But,
And,
Yeah.
and frankly, it says there at the end there, if homeowners in the community are entitled to have a realistic opportunity to create second units. This is HCD's deputy administrator.
and I would indicate.
If the locality fails to provide an adequate ministerial process pursuant to subdivision A and C through G, applications for second units should be subject to the state standards of subdivision B.
I can indicate as a planner position, I was in a planning position in the early 90s, and there was a lot of discussion at that point in time on second units. And it's when it all started coming down that the state dictated, you shall allow
Yeah.
second units to occur. A lot of the cities at that time were scared of second units and
Yeah.
what it was going to do. The city of Santa Barbara had a requirement at the time, granted it doesn't exist today because things change over time, but you had to provide a two-car garage for that second unit. Well, I can tell you,
State
the
said no.
majority, at that time, though, they didn't.
No, they could then, yeah.
Yeah. And so that, I mean, they did it for the sheer fact they didn't want to have any, and that
Right.
was the easiest way to
Right.
do it. Your codes here, the last time it was changed was in 2004, so 11 years. Things have changed.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you look at this and you ask me the question, is this ordinance intended to be strict for a reason stricter than the state? It could have been. I live in the valley
Yeah.
since '85, but whether, I don't know their intent at the time that they adopted this.
And I guess what I'm trying to get at is I think this raises, I'm broadening the issue.
Right.
It's not just a non-conforming permit, it's the conforming permit too, that maybe should be reviewed with respect to the current policy recommendations,
That's
or at
up to
least
the
this
city
current
and
stu-
city
Because the
council.
second unit code has been modified, the state second unit law has been modified since
Correct.
ordinance 771.
Because a lot of agencies used to require use permits for second units.
Right.
And now it's ministerial. It's, do you comply or do you not?
So we got a broader question here than just the amnesty program.
You may.
Okay.
I don't
All right.
disagree.
Well, okay, you know how I get off on things.
Is it possible to change the subject there, Chair?
Please.
In the documents, it lists a number of things and says that there's a consideration of discussion for deed restrictions, for second unit size, for parking. We used to have rules that you couldn't remove covered parking. And we had people convert garages and we couldn't remove covered parking. And so there are a number of questions, and they certainly aren't ours to vet. But I certainly am wondering when this is going to take place in the process so we can establish it as rules to the community so they understand what's happening. And I certainly do think, at least expect, that these issues will really have nothing to do with the housing element arena. They're just going to really be a clarification for the amnesty program and nothing else. And is there any timeline to when we do take on the second deed restriction, the deed restriction for the second units, and find out what the intent of the city is? Do we really want 2 units on one lot without an owner being present, to where we have 2 rented units in effect? And I don't want the people to come in and think they're going to do things, spend a lot of money on this, spend a lot of money on the sewer, spend a lot of money on Title 24, and sprinklers and all the other fun stuff they get to do, with the intent that they think this deed restriction is going to go away. They're going to move to Idaho, and they're going to have 2 rentals on a lot. And then guess what? Like we've always done, we change it. And so before people commit to a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort, I would certainly hope that we could vet these things and get them out. That's what I really want to do. Is just get a sheet. You either conform, you don't. It complies or it doesn't. You can or you can't, and that's it. And we're all done.
And I will indicate that under the second unit ordinance, for new second unit ordinance today, I was speaking directly of planning requirements. So somebody does come in, it is a ministerial, it's a checklist kind of situation, but they still have to comply with all the other regulations. And so
In my understanding, there's a deed restriction on for the conforming permits, and then they have to provide like some sort of statement or affidavit annually?
that is the way the current code reads, yes. And that, you know, as you know, as an advisory board,
I just passed out something I did this afternoon. I already would modify it based on being educated by Mr. Stewart and Ms. McLaughlin, so I'm not standing on it for, gospel, but I just wanted to pass it out in terms of the kind of thing that I would, in writing, like, I'll put my neck out on the block, what I'd like to see in terms of a different approach to the program. And you know, I'll just go through it and see, and try to, hopefully it provokes discussion. Specify the building code in effect. I understand your idea, fine. Just, if it's that 1997, not be the year that it was built, but it's that one, okay? I get it, you know, I understand. But start with something simple like that, and then have a short list of standards added to that for things like that have to be done for health and safety, rather than having other sections with carved-out exceptions. I don't think that references under health and safety requirements, just delete them. Have it be part of the short list. Keep it simple. Maybe consider modifying the zoning regulations to simply state up to a 50% maximum of floor area up to the maximum lot coverage for that particular zone, whether it's an R1, R2, R3. We have to understand, both for new construction and non-conforming permits, you need some square footage to amortize these fixed costs, like the sanitary district fees. A lot of difference between 1,200 square feet and 640 in terms of amortizing that. And again, too constrained of a size starts to be a problem with not working against affordable housing goals. I think that, Mr. Stewart, I would already alter, I understand under 4. I just think it should make sure that it doesn't, unless it has to comply with current code, it should be more as long as the existing building envelope's not changed with in effect at original construction, that can references over to number 5. Delete the reference to conformity to the requirements set forth in 10-2.1709, except as delineated. That gets rid of the Title 24 ambiguity. Include an appeals procedure if somebody's got a special or unforeseen circumstance, and consider making requirements for the conforming permits move into closer congruity with the intent of state second unit law, as well as the non-conforming. So those are my thoughts, already subject to being educated tonight and changed. So,
Can I ask one question, please, for clarification? On number 5, your reference, and I believe it goes back to page 4, and if you wouldn't
Yes.
mind checking, could I ask a question?
yes,
You notice how we have, and it may be just the type of document this was, you notice if we go from the Uniform Housing Code, it's underlined.
Yes.
We go to the health and safety, and it's underlined. We
Right.
go to the modified zoning ordinance, that's the section 10-2.179. That's zoning, that's planning, okay?
Right.
This next line item is new construction requirements.
Yes.
That should be tabbed over to the left a little bit.
not part of modified.
It is not part of that section
Right.
that relates to the zoning ordinance. I just want to clarify that. I realized that as we
No,
were discussing it
actually,
earlier.
that's how I took it.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
that's how I took it. But I do think it's important that repairs be thought of carefully as on what
Absolutely.
code that should be applied to those repairs. But I'm more concerned with this Title 24 application to something that's 30 years old. That we shouldn't require them to put new windows in to get the second unit non-conforming permit, which is how this now reads.
I've had the chance to read through this about 5 times
Yeah.
since we first discussed that. And it's a roundabout way, but how that would work is the word repairs in that statement.
Yes.
That would refer back to the interpretation in the uniform or in the International Building Code or California
Okay.
Building Code.
Okay.
And I would go to that and go, oh, you're making a repair, you don't have to comply with all those
There you
current
go.
standards.
Because that's how it's stated in the
stated.
1997 version. Okay.
So, but it's a little confusing when I first read that, and now that I've
And
kind
if
of
you're
went through that,
confused,
which I would have preferred that this just read all alterations. Then it would have been very clear to all of us what that would mean. It means the same exact thing.
yes, sir.
But I have to chase it back into the building code.
Yes, sir.
To make that interpretation.
Thank you. Yeah, that's yes.
One more item, and I'm still unclear. 50% of the current first unit, and then it states 640.
Well,
What-
the exceptions say may exceed 640 under modified.
The maximum size of a compliance unit may exceed 640 square feet. up to a maximum of 50% of the floor area of the principal residence. That's on page 4,
Right.
item F.
Right.
Under floor area.
Not to exceed 1,200 feet, which is the state maximum. I didn't see that in there.
That's not in there.
I didn't see
And
that
you-
in
And you
there.
are, and the state code is very fine, is fine with it, with saying you can be looser than the 1,200.
And so what are we doing? I got 7,000 square foot homes insured. I have a number of homes that don't apply or aren't even considering it because, and you know where they are, they're up on Foothill. What they did was they took those grand old 1950, 1920 pool houses, made a 2,200 square foot secondary house. I mean, I have some of those up there. Well, I'm not going to mention who it is.
Well, and that's- yeah.
And they're historic, and I have 3 full-size houses on a single 3.5 acre unit, and we have a number of those. And those people aren't going to come forward when they look at that 640. They're just in a
That's where I
row in
was
their
coming
eyes.
from, is tie it to the lot coverage in the zone they're in. 50% of the floor area are constrained by the lot coverage. I mean, I was just saying that's where I was coming
Well,
from.
and again, I don't think that's part of,
You know.
that's nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
I would just like to see it in writing.
Yeah, I understand.
I don't want to have any part in determining what's correct or not correct.
While we're on to the details of building, what happens if somebody comes with a second-story apartment over their garage under the current program?
Oh, 2 stories.
That's 640
typically-
square
Yeah,
feet, okay.
typically 2 stories is subject to design review. I have to think about it with the second unit because of the way it is. I don't think there's anywhere, is a single-family home property zoned. I don't think we have anything. Sherry, have you seen any 2-story second units where we've done it as it meets all the code and it's just, it does go design review.
So if they came
That's
in,
what we've
if
done
they
in the
came in
past.
under the compliance program for the non-conforming permit, they would be referred to the planning commission?
For design review if it's a 2-story.
Okay. All right, well, have we talked about all this enough? Mayor Pro Tem Strobel.
I have a question, and I'm going to be very careful.
Oh, there
here.
it is.
I'm asking as a citizen. And under the guidelines, page 3, paragraph D, property conditions, it explains, it refers to the structural components of the proposed second unit, and the last line and a half says, in addition, the qualifying property must be free of fire hazards, etc. Is that saying that in addition to the second unit that's being considered, there's also an inspection of the primary unit?
Well, let's let Mr. Stewart and Ms. McLaughlin give us an educated response. Because you notice that section bleeds over to the top of the next page. The standards and review of review and compliance shall be those set forth in Chapter 10 of the Uniform Housing Code.
That was down in here. And then on the next page. While we're reviewing that, I will note that Sherry's comments you can find on page 4, the modified zoning D. It talks about nor shall the city's design review permit requirements apply except for exterior alterations above the first floor. So that's clearly in there.
Back to Mayor Pro Tem's question.
Right.
Yeah.
But now, did you see this part? Yeah.
My response to the citizen is that yes. It would, the way it's written, it would have to go, would
Mayor
have
Pro
to.
Tem Strobel, you're
advise.
getting very good with these questions.
The other thing I wanted to point out, Mr. Chair, not to make things more confusing, but there is regulations in this standard that exceed what the California Building Code now require, because they've actually changed some of those standards over the years. For instance, the requirement for light and ventilation, 10% of the floor area.
Right.
In the code, if you came in today to build a brand-new house, that standard is now 8%. So it is less than the standard. So we're actually requiring more stringent standard than for brand-new development.
But it is, I'm sorry.
There lies part of my concern of having basically another building code as far as a set of regulations, instead of adopting a standard that is ongoing review and maintained and evaluated by professionals, not just building officials, but the industry and other people that weigh in on making changes to code elements.
Because that's, yeah, no, I understand. It's,
And I don't mean to make it confusing, but I just want to point that out,
Yeah.
that if you came in today with a brand-new house, I'm going to evaluate that room, living room, let's call it a living room. Oh, does it have 8% of the floor area and windows? Under this standard, I would be evaluating that at 10%.
all right, now, and I'm going to come back to Mayor Pro Tem's question, because this just occurred to me listening to you. Here it says the qualifying property, again, is going to have a complete inspection for these conditions. Certainly something that the ombudsman better be talking to the property owner about. Is that also the case if you were applying for a second unit addition for a conforming permit, that you would inspect the existing property, the existing structure, the existing residence, if you were coming in to get a conforming permit for the second unit?
They would comply with the current Title 24 regulations.
For the new construction?
For the new construction.
What about the inspection of the existing dwelling?
We do not perform an inspection of the existing dwelling under current standards.
You understand my point here?
I totally understand.
We're looking at a higher level of inspection on the qualifying property for the non-conforming permit than on the on the permitted dwelling.
That would be my opinion, yes.
There's something, I think all of Chapter 16 should be thrown out. We should remove it from the housing element cycle 5. I think it's a terrible thing, and I really think it's almost evil. What it does to property owners, to tenants, is just not right. It penalizes people.
You're talking about the reporting requirement?
Yeah, the report, but all of Chapter 16 is just not, it's terrible.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Danny.
Permission
To go.
to withdraw as soon as our publisher makes a comment?
Yes.
I'm just wondering if you're going to allow public comment.
Please. If I have the discretion to offer an exception, I will, if one's required.
And I actually appreciate you taking public comment after you have held discussion, because it does help me refine my message. I also want to thank you for what I believe is coming to a conclusion that I've held of myself. I would appreciate very much if you make the recommendation to anyone who will listen that this program is entirely inadequate for whatever goals. Even if the goal was one, it will not be met by these standards. The city really needs to take a step back. You finally got the ombudsman in place. That's terrific. But the standards are so inconsistent and easily misunderstood that I think whatever can be done to clarify that message and then come back with a new program that's going to meet the goals, it's essential, especially given the way a great many of the citizens in this community view the city process. It's heartening to hear that you want that clarification, so when someone comes in the door, they know what the standards are, and it's easy for them to tell whether they're going to qualify. And coming up with those standards is not going to be easy, and I appreciate the city manager's explanation that it had to be done in a hurry, and that there is an opportunity to do that. So to the degree that you can make that recommendation, I would very much encourage that. And I appreciate your work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Board Member Daddy? Thank you for coming. And we'll try to wrap up the rest of the agenda as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes. And I appreciate everyone's indulgence. Obviously, you can tell numbers of us have kind of dug into this pretty deeply, and also as a result of your being here, I think we've all learned even more. So I appreciate that. You know.
Mr.
Shall
Chair,
we?
if I can just add something.
Please, thank
Because
you.
I think there's some value in this, and I appreciate all the comments. Clearly, the appeals board has brought out some very reasonable requests. And maybe if we brought back a copy of the Uniform Housing Code and a copy of the International Property Maintenance Code, and we could kind of look at those two documents kind of as a base of this.
Yes.
As we move forward. The issue to me as your code enforcer for this community and building official is that when we write a new code, and really that's kind of what we're doing right here, then that's open for interpretation of how we're going to implement and enforce that. And you've brought out some wonderful points, and I wish I had very clear, concise answers for you, but I don't, because this is like brand-new code. Where we go back to an established code and use that as the basis, and then you can say, you know, we really need to add this, or we need to add that for this standard. I can go back then and say this is what the interpretation is based on national standards that are uniform in the United States of how we look at things.
Yeah.
And so I know you didn't ask me for my recommendation, but I would throw that out as your building official's recommendation, and maybe that's where we start on this to move forward on this program. Because I'm a little concerned, because I have conflict in the current building code and this document. Now I have to open that for interpretation of how we're going to enforce things, how we're going to interpret things.
Right.
And it just makes it difficult on not only the applicant, but on staff of how we're going to proceed on this. And the fact of not being clear and concise answers is difficult for all of us. And so
I
just
heartily
wanted to make
concur
that.
with your recommendation as a start, because I think it's going in the direction of we've got to increase the efficiency of processing here. The clarity is going to be the only way, only hope of actually doing these in some numbers, you know, which if that's indeed the policy goal. So thank you. I accept your recommendation as a start. I think it's a good idea. Others, before we move on.
That's what I think.
Board Member Farmer? Board Member Hilger, do you want to respond to Mr.?
Yeah, thank you
Stewart?
very much.
Thank you. All right, let's move on. Item 3 was the public education on appeals procedures, and these are the forms that I believe, Ms. McLaughlin, you came up with?
I utilized the information that you discussed at your previous meeting and the examples, and tried to incorporate.
Yes.
We have an informational sheet
Yeah.
that tries to go through. I'd appreciate any comments on that. We have the building appeals application form, which is just the form that would be submitted.
Right.
And I would note, since I didn't give my memo, I mean, I gave it to you, but I did not state it, I would like to indicate that at the last meeting, there was a question about the appeal process and the fee, the filing fee.
Right.
It is $500. However, recently in June, I think it was, of 2013, the council made a determination that if an appeal is filed, they must file the $500, but when they come before the Building Appeals Board, If it is granted, then they would get a refund of that money. And I did not have that information
And I
at your
saw
last
that.
meeting. I want to make sure you all understand that, because I think that's an important distinction.
Now, is there a fee associated with just a code interpretation
No,
application?
that's already a part of
The fees
the
you pay
building, the building plan check, if it occurs during that stage, if there's something in the field that occurs. The building code interpretation is something that they would file. It would be turned over to the building official, and he would give a written
Okay,
interpretation.
right, okay.
And so there's no fee in that.
This is, well, I didn't see any issues personally. Board members?
Well, and if you do find things later, please let me know.
Okay, well, I would say at least tentatively, I know it's just an information, no, it's a discussion item, but at the appropriate time, I think we're ready to adopt it. I mean, pretty soon here.
Well, at this point, somebody could have filed an appeal any day since we have
We have it.
a board, so we're going to utilize the forms.
So you're
I
ready,
hope-
I think
I
it's
mean, and you
wonderful.
can change them as you see fit in the future.
I think it's great, we've got the form, yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes.
may, we have found this in other jurisdictions I work for very beneficial, because during the course of construction, time is of the essence. If we're holding a project up because of an interpretation issue, if we can get early resolution to this, we can move on. What I've experienced in my over now 30 years of working in the building department is that a lot of people will come in and have not thoroughly thought through what they're asking. And when they have to sit down and put it initially in writing,
Yes.
sometimes that changes their perspective right away. And if not, then it comes to me, rather than talking somebody across the counter, just like I had the opportunity this evening, to sit down and study the code section that they're wanting an interpretation on. I can go to national standards and read the opinions
Yes.
about what that looks like, and then write them a response. A lot of times, or actually majority of times, after the people have studied that, they've said, "You're right, we're moving on, going on." It's only those cases where there's clear, I don't agree, that would come to the Building Board of Appeals. None of this work that we'll be doing, going back and forth here, is going to be wasted, because we'll use that as a basis for presenting that as the factual information to the Board of Appeals, giving you the background of what essentially the building department's opinion is in regards to that, and substantiating that with reference documents as well. And then you can weigh in on those kinds of changes. What is somewhat unique about the position that we are all in is that even though I do not get a vote when it goes to the Board of Appeals, I'm actually what they call an ex officiary member of the board. I sit with you, I can ask questions, I can provide clarity, you can ask me questions during debate, we can have a discussion, and then when the chair calls for the vote, then I'm silent at that point. So it's somewhat of a unique process that we go through in the appeals process. Normally, you're probably not going to see a whole lot of these, because normally it can be worked out during this early stages of the process. But on occasion, it is their right, and I'm glad we have this system in place so that an individual can take advantage of that if they so choose. But in the 28 years I was a building official, I only had 5 appeals that went to the board. Had a lot of interpretations, but only 5 appeals. So it's not an ongoing situation in that regard.
Did you
But
have many appeals having to do with, out of those 5? Well, first of all, it indicates how well you were doing your job with so few appeals. That's commendable. Alternate methods, does that come up much on the appeal issue?
Typically, alternate methods can be handled by the building official, and if reasonable documentation is submitted to the building official, that being me for you right at the moment, if that is provided to us, more than likely we'll approve that as alternative materials. If for some reason there is some nuance into that and we cannot come to an agreement on that, maybe the installation they want to use in a certain type of a building or a certain situation, and it is silent in the methods and materials, and I do not feel comfortable with that as the building official and come up with whatever justification that I feel is appropriate, then that would probably come to you, and we'd be dealing with probably a very narrow scope in regards to that element.
Yeah.
But the majority of the time, it can be handled. Giving an example, I was the building official in Santa Paula. A company came in with a brand new seismic framing system known as Hardy Frame, widely used now, but nobody would accept that because they wanted to install that in a wood frame building, and the code said, no, you can't mix wood and metal for seismic design. And so and I was in Santa Paula. They wanted to submit this as an alternative methods and materials. I reviewed their analysis. I consulted other structural engineers in regards to the methodology. I felt comfortable with it, and Santa Paula was the first building department allowed Hardy Frame, which is now is a national seismic framing system used probably worldwide now. But that just gives you an example of how that works.
Yeah.
And now, if I would have said, really, we need the bottom plate needs to be modified to do X, and if they didn't want to do that, that would be probably an issue that
Right.
would probably come before you.
A fairly technical.
Technical
Yeah.
side of that.
Thank you. Board Member Farmer.
Yeah, do you think we'll see more applicants because of the amnesty program through the sanitation district?
I would say, from a planning standpoint, no. I mean, I don't think we'll see any going to planning commission, because mine's a very ministerial, if you
Yeah.
apply or not. I would think the area that's probably the most, possibility would be the building side of things, and I'd defer to.
I just wonder if that'll bring
It-
more people out that have signed up for the amnesty.
Right. I think from your perspective, if we can work out some of the concerns that you have, and clearly you've heard my concerns tonight about this, we can work some of that out. I think it'd be a lot smoother, a lot easier to process.
Yeah, I was told by the sanitation district that those people who have signed up for the amnesty and paid the money, were elected to have the money put on their taxes. If the city, for one reason or another, denies their application, they will refund their money back.
Oh, good.
Whether or not if I get my money back, I don't know.
Well, we'll wait and see how the garage conversion comes forward.
And the 640 feet and the et cetera, and setbacks. Okay, let's try to, thank you. I think we've been here a while. Let's try to wind up on our informational items, the status of the ombudsman position.
I gave you information in the memo, and they have, at this point, we had one applicant withdraw. The other applicant was interviewed by the selection committee and was accepted, and that's Rick Basacci. And we will be working with him later this week to get him information and start that training process. And we will still be running ads in the newspaper, requesting people to apply for the positions. We can have more people on our list so that property owners can proceed. We will be forwarding these ombudsmen, the 20 sanitation, the payments that have gone on, and try to get them to start approaching them, verify if it's a second unit situation, and encourage them to pursue through the ombudsman or coming in and seeing Sherry and I to pursue this. That's an easy list to start with since they've already paid the big chunk.
Well, certainly, I think we all appreciate somebody's willingness to do this on
Absolutely.
a volunteer basis.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a big job,
A big job.
and we need more
Yes.
if we're going to go anywhere into the plus 100 level. And again,
Absolutely.
Hopefully, it's going to get a lot easier if we can make some of these changes. Well, no, I'll reserve my comments for item 6. There's something associated with that, but anything else on the ombudsman? Just continuing to solicit interest. Okay. On the ad hoc subcommittee report, we don't have anything in writing yet, but with thanks to City Manager Clark, we did have a meeting with Mr. Holman, the general manager. Also, I took up the City Council's challenge and attended a board meeting, spoke. Plan on going to more of their lateral subcommittee meetings and board meetings. Again, getting educated, and it's very interesting. I thought that, and Mr. Clark, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak at all, but on this, because I think it's important, your perspective on this, but there was a degree of interagency, a spirit of interagency cooperation there. We specifically brought up the ombudsman issue, as you recall, for the record, that they were willing to incorporate communication with the ombudsman on the sanitary district issues, which is extremely important, I think. But there were more issues than the second unit compliance program coming that affect city residents. And I thought it was extremely valuable that for things that could affect many residents financially beyond the second unit compliance program, there's a discussion has started on that. And again, Mr. Clark and Ms. McLaughlin, if you wanted to add to my comments on that, Mr. Daddy and I are going to get something in writing, and by the time our 90 days is up. But I just thought it was, we're only about 30 days in. It feels like we've already been doing it for a year. But it really was extremely valuable, I thought, because just to be educated about all the issues way beyond the compliance program, and the fact that the second units are going to be facing with issues whether or not the city comes to try to find them and do penalties at the expiration of the compliance program, whatever that date is extended. I think that's something that publicly everyone needs to understand. These second units are going to have to get into compliance one way or the other. And we might as well get in front of that wave rather than have people feel victimized on the back end. That's my opinion. Mr. Clark, did you?
First of all, I agree very much. It was a very productive meeting, and there was a spirit of cooperation. I think one point that was really important to us is that people be able to, through the ombudsman, find out information about how their situation relates to the sewer district or the sanitary district. And they were very willing to work with the ombudsman, provide information so that people can be informed before they actually bring their property address forward. So that was very heartening. The other thing that we talked about some is that they do have financing programs to pay the fees or financing options, and I think that'll be helpful.
And they seem to be very, very willing to explain all of that to the ombudsman, so
Exactly.
they can communicate that. So it was very productive. And I really thank you for both of your time, willing to invest in this. So,
Yeah, City Manager, I have a question. Do we still, does the city still have in place through, I think it's Help of Ojai, the loan program for those people who live within the city that aren't able to financially bring their house up to standard? I know at one time, Jessica Murray, I believe, that worked at Little House, or was working on that program. I was just wondering, do we still have that in place?
We did not have that, no. Unfortunately, the funding has been taken away by the state.
That was under the redevelopment.
Exactly.
Okay.
If I can weigh in, we do have an arrangement through the county community development block grants to fund projects for low-income families through Habitat for Humanity.
Habitat got the block
right.
grant for that?
And so they can actually apply, well, who got that was the county, and they have an agreement with that.
They have a cooperative
And
agreement, okay.
in the unincorporated area and the 5 smaller cities can tap into that. And I think,
Okay.
I don't know if we've had any applications here in Ojai. You know, the rules are somewhat stringent, and you have to meet certain low-income standards. But if they comply, the Habitat can help them out.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
All right, are we, any more discussion on the sanitary district? Then let's move into the potential future agenda items. We have, I think we still probably want to keep talking about the second unit compliance program, right?
I've said what I think about it.
Dale wants to eliminate that whole,
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, I thought maybe we at least have it on the agenda.
part of the book.
Yeah, why don't we at least have the second unit program still on the agenda at our next meeting for discussion? And anything else? We need to pick a date, and we're getting into the holiday season. I wouldn't mind waiting till January. Anybody else?
Well, I think we should have, no, January.
I got family stuff coming up. What fits in with the other meetings for staff's convenience in January?
We've been on a Wednesday night. January 8th and January 22nd will be planning commission meetings.
January 8th and 22nd?
Second, correct, Sherry?
Okay.
So I guess if you're still planning on a Wednesday night, you're looking at, unless you want to do it January 1st, I'm sure we'd all
No.
be glad to be here for you. The 15th or the 29th are your other options if you stay.
They may have it on the 8th instead?
Because we have a special meeting with city council on the 14th, and their meeting's on the 15th.
Are they on the third Wednesday?
Third.
All right.
We asked
Oh,
if they
okay.
wanted to put 22nd as a special. Why don't we do the 29th?
Well, you know, I totally blew that then. If it's, there's an 8th and a 22nd, right?
We do the 29th, which is a 5th Wednesday, and nobody's on that.
Okay.
Is everyone okay with that?
29th
29th?
of January
Okay, yeah,
We'll clear their council.
yeah. Okay. And
at 6 PM,
okay.
29th.
And this may or may not be a future agenda item. Maybe you just answer the question. From the purpose of just protocol and everything, as chair of this appeal board, is it appropriate for me to contact the chair of Planning Commission and just discuss some of these issues we've talked about today? Is that okay or not okay?
Typically, staff would be involved in that.
But if staff was involved, would that be okay?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I first introduced myself to them, they said, oh, we'd like to work together.
Yeah.
I've not followed up on that at all. I'd like to, but I want to do it in the right way. So maybe like a meeting with you, Ann, sometime in January, just call them up and say, hey, maybe we ought to talk through some things.
Now, you're interested in the planning commission chair?
Well, that's,
The whole-
I
just want to make
there-
sure I get
I
what you
was
need.
thinking of that as being maybe appropriate. I'm open to suggestions on that.
All right,
But
we'll work
I am
some-
also trying, they're wrestling with this too. And I just would want to open up, how's the way to cooperate to get this going better,
Okay.
faster? Should we maybe even consider a joint workshop, for example? That's the kind of thing I would like to ask,
Good idea, that's.
Great,
just to facilitate things.
appreciate that.
Okay. All
I'll
right,
work with you directly if that's okay, and we
Thank you.
can discuss it.
and are we done? We're adjourned. Thank you so
Sherry.
much.
Thank you. Definitely, definitely. You're still recording.
Put a lot of energy.